Well, it's all been changed so far today. I'm not going to change that. By the time you finish listening to this, the 100 million or so lines of code in the Microsoft, Apple, and Google operating systems will have changed. A bug will have been fixed, a security patch created, a driver updated for new hardware, or even an eagerly waited for a new feature has been added. And this change will ripple through what I'm calling the digital supply chain to the entrepreneurial app writer, who will spend yet another day getting their app to work again, to the end users who will have to cope with continuous updates, and to the organizational IT who will need to regression test the changes before releasing their organization. That's you, by the way. It's not all bad news, of course. There are hackers out there who will be spending many happy hours looking for new zero-day exploits. And my good friend and ITLF colleague, John McCarthy, might say more about that later. So driven by increasingly rapid technological change added to network effects of combining and socializing technologies, knowledge volatility, my topic today, knowledge volatility, the rate at which your knowledge goes out of date, I think is reaching a crucial tipping point. Today, we're focusing laser-like on IT leadership futures. So I'd like to take some time to talk about what knowledge volatility means for your organization, specifically your IT leadership in it, and how things need to change due to knowledge volatility. Now, I'm no Sherlock, but your presence today suggests to me that your organization is digital. Whether your products are digital or your services are digital or delivered digitally, your organization has a CEO, an IT director, head of IT, that's you. You're interested in what's new in IT leadership, so you're here today to meet others with similar shoes to network. That has to be a good sign. As a digital organization, you're in the digital supply chain, and so you're exposed to the forces of change that arise therein. In fact, you may be the cause of some of them for some others. You'll know better than me what this means for your organization, but I guess one outcome is that you're running to standstill. Depending on your organization, your board may or may not understand the forces of digital change. And so you may not be getting all the support you need. Your budget may be too small, for instance. And to be honest, IT is beginning to look to many like plumbing, just infrastructure needing maintenance rather than being the driver of organization value. Your team is superb, of course, but they have to deal with end users angry that they can't do what they need to do, that they can't have the software that they need, and that they always seem to be last on the list for interventions. Actually, I may just have described my organization, so forgive me for that. You more than cope with all of this. You drive your organization forward into its aggressive digital future and give it what it needs. But I believe that there's a tsunami of change coming caused by increasing rates of knowledge volatility, and not all organizations will survive. If I'm right, depending on the sector, I think we've got around 2 to 5 years to re-engineer organizations to be able to cope. Up until now, organizational leadership has really been the management of complexity, building complex operations for a complex organization to succeed in a complex business environment. It's no secret, and you don't need my research to tell you that the key to planning, to managing complexity is upfront planning. Because of this, planners were what an organization needed at all levels to compete successfully as markets became more complex. And so it was planners and people who would develop, implement, and follow a plan that were recruited into any digital industry. Don't get me wrong, I love planners. Planners are great. Some of my best friends are planners. Anyway, organizations who built for complexity with immovably strong foundations, with the sturdiest 30-meter high walls, masses of chunky crenellations on top, and the tallest flagpoles supporting proud flags. All is strength in the organization built for complexity, and there is very little flex. Perhaps those flags flap a little in the winds of change. It has a king or queen at the top of an incredibly baroque decision structure that is interminably slow, but, and it's a big but facing our profession, to a greater or lesser extent, everything we do from education and training to hiring is there to attract or develop the planet in the workforce. At schools, we learn the mathematics of this, the science of that. We learn about causality and state machines and sequences and loops. We learn about addition before we learn about subtraction, and multiplication before we learn about division. We learn about Dalton's billiard ball model of the atom before we learn about Schrodinger's quantum model, if we even get that far. It's complexity building on complexity. Team building in organizations is also structured around discovering the potential for planning expertise, and careers are built as a response to complexity. Try to rise high in an organization with only technical capability. Very difficult. But isn't knowledge volatility just change, you ask me? Things have changed before, you'll say, and we cope then. Why not now? Because of the increasing rapidity of technological change, we've moved outside of smooth change, change with a laminar-like flow that is predictable and can be planned for by the organization. We're moving from smooth change into a more turbulent change, which is unmanageable in organizations built only for complexity. In short, I think we're heading towards a singularity in organizations' ability to cope. And the only thing that will save organizations is your and your team's adaptability. Adaptability is key here. The organizational change we need comes down to faster and smarter training and faster and smarter hiring for individual adaptability. The job market is changing to be faster and smarter, and there's no better person to tell us about how it's changing than Keith Rosser. So, Keith, how are you doing?
Hello, John.
Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
You've had a brilliant introduction from Joe, so I won't repeat that. But how do you see the job market in IT changing over the coming years because of digital?
Well, I think it's getting ever more competitive. There's a competition for talent right now as it stands, but I think that competition is going to develop even more so. Competition for skills, and particular skills that companies are wanting as digital becomes more complex, but also a competition for talent within the UK and outside of the UK. Now that we have virtual hiring forever, and one of the positives about coming out of the pandemic is that organizations now can hire remotely and virtually.
That's such a good change.
Yes, organizations are doing a lot of thinking around how could they now recruit and hire a global workforce from anywhere. So I see that changing a lot as we move forward, and actually where organizations and where workforces are based.
So we're taking some of the constraints of organizations to be able to employ who they want, where they want, with the skills that they want. That's such good news. Really, really good news. The second question I have for you is, what insight can you give to the IT leaders today to make their lives easier as they explore the job market?
Well, I looked recently at about 250,000 new jobs being posted a week, and throughout the pandemic, IT jobs were never outside the top 3. Around healthcare and logistics, hospitality, IT was always within the top 3 throughout the pandemic, and I don't see that changing. In many ways, I think I see the demand for IT personnel growing as companies now are digitizing more and more, partly due to the pandemic and new digital business models, but also I think as a response to the rising costs that organizations are expecting to bear over the coming months and years. Digital will be seen as a way of trying to address that. So I think the demand will only increase. What I would say to people right now is really think about addressing global remote working. What restrictions are you putting on your own workforce in terms of where they can work? Adopt virtual hiring. Be open to hiring people anywhere. Be flexible on the employment models. And what sort of employment models are you insisting upon? IT professionals range from freelancers to limited companies, self-employed, permanent. So be flexible on that. Think about how to captivate the next generation in the war on skills, particularly in digital, as more and more complexity comes into digital. How do organizations attract the sort of next generation of skills? And I think a big one for all of us to consider in digital as elsewhere is diversity. So be inclusive in hiring, and I welcomed UK government's announcement yesterday for pilots about salary levels on job adverts to attract more women applicants, and also to think differently about CV career gaps. So, but I think that's a start. There's a lot more that's going to be needed to do to really fully have an inclusive approach to hiring.
Thanks, Keith. Those are great insights. Keith leads the Better Hiring Institute. It's a great organization looking to radicalize the future of hiring, the future of the workplace. Go and have a look at it. You might enjoy it. There's opportunities to get involved as well. Thanks, Keith. So, where were we? Oh, yes. Knowledge volatility and its future impact on organizations.
John, just a question coming there. Do you mind if I just
Yeah.
chip in? The question's just come into the chat. Is it 250,000 jobs a day in the UK, EU, or globally, Keith?
UK, I was analysing.
Thank you.
Bad, huh?
Back to you,
Not
John.
bad at all. No problem. So we all know Moore's law suggests transistor density doubles every 2 years. It's not actually a law, of course, but it's validated by experience in production. It's an exponential rate, but the leading edge is understood and being turned into extreme computing power. It is a bit scary that we can double compute power every couple of years, but it's also comforting in that we know how things are going to progress and we can cope, and we know that we've coped with that rate of change and could cope with it again. What isn't limited by Moore's law, though, is the deep knowledge that is needed to understand the interactions that change when your compute box is introduced to customers, to organizations, and yes, to our lives, our democracy, and our society. But they're for a different talk. Knowledge volatility is the explosive combination of technical changes within their social context. Already we see the effects. Because of knowledge volatility, schools and universities don't know what to teach. Things go out of date too quickly for them to actually capture the essence, the zeitgeist. Education is becoming chaotic with changes coming faster and faster. And while change may be just manageable in the organization, may just be manageable in your organization, it's beginning to outpace the communications that are needed to make a centralized planning system work, whether that be a school, a university, or an organization, who knows, even a government. I see at least 2 implications for organizations in their development. So I'm going to start with the individual. So to keep up with the pace, you're going to need to train at the leading edge. But the increasing rate of change means much more to you. You'll begin to have to adapt in real time to the changes you face. At least at the beginning, if this were to happen tomorrow, you'll need new skills tomorrow that you don't have today. But because knowledge volatility places great value on the ability to change, in a business in which skills to be productive change every day, who can determine precisely which skills you will need for tomorrow but you? You're the only one in your context doing what you do. Who is better than you of knowing what you need next? And when you're hungry for fast food, you don't let others tell you what to eat. When you're hungry for fast skills, you don't want others to tell you what to study. You got access to Udemy, to FutureLearn, and all the other online platforms, and they're way ahead of your HR department's ability to determine what your skill needs are. And there's more. You're actually going to have to be your own chef to be able to get the digital skills diet you need. And that takes the sort of skills that stay with you throughout life, the ability to choose the best ingredients, to know how to season them and to cook them the way that they need. Improving your digital skills diet is a lot like that. You've got to be able to think critically about what you have today and what you need tomorrow. You need to reflect on which skills you already have and which are the holes that need filling the most for a digital skill portfolio. And for the organization, the growing importance of workforce adaptability leads to our first change. We're going to need education which is pulled by the individual. They're going to have skills of critical thinking, of reflectiveness, and they're going to have these practiced over and over again. With knowledge volatility reaching levels that are simply not manageable through any centralized model, we're really at a tipping point in the structuring of organization that affects hiring of your digital team. No longer is it acceptable to hire only for complexity, although of course that will still be needed as complexity isn't going anywhere. You must begin hiring for adaptability. The move is from centralization of development to decentralization and individualization of development. That means giving employees the time to grow as the benefit to your organization. It means discretionary budgets for individuals determined to determine their own overnight training. And it means a greater level of trust in your team to determine the team's direction. If we look back at 2001, the Agile Manifesto first recognized that the digital needs of customers meant a radical change for software development process throughout the organization. Their analysis was prescient, but limited to the customer space. Now, as we see the rapidity of change increase to levels never before seen, we are entering a new phase in which adaptability of the individual is the only way to counter turbulent change caused by knowledge volatility. And we should start rebuilding our organizations for knowledge volatility. Here's a very short 3-point plan. Point 1, start by identifying the most adaptable members of your team and give them what they need to perform and teach each other. Point 2, hire for adaptability. And finally, convince your board that your organization's digital future can be managed, but only if they follow an agenda that promotes adaptability, removes the need for slow comms, and decentralizes to the coalface. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I very much enjoyed your talk, and I very much enjoyed the many comments in the chat asking, I can only see a white screen, what's happening? So I think you held everybody's interest with, where are we going with the white screen? Which I must say I really enjoyed looking at, because I'd already had a glimpse into what you were going to do before you did it.